So, you want to learn about the history of the American presidency, or maybe you want to become the president yourself, or maybe you're just keen on ruling the country and/or world. Well, if you want to be the guy or gal in charge, you need to know what it means to behave and think like a president in order to have successful terms under the ordinance of the Constitution. Well, to start off, we need to focus on four areas if you're to become an executive branch whiz like myself. First off, we'll be talking about the history of the presidency and how it came to be during the birth of the country. We'll also look at the process of choosing a president, how that works in itself, and I'll also give you instructions on how you can boost your chances of becoming a president so that you can avoid being impeached or removed, like with these three, technically four hooligans down below. Now, while the history of the United States is long and vast, we're only going to be focusing on the wake of the presidential speculation, which occurred during the dawn of the Constitution being written up in 1787 up to 1789. Now, the country looked quite different back then, so the motivations around having a president was different from what it probably is today. With a lot less states and a lot less power, technology, or legal loopholes that currently exist, the Constitution wasn't dead set on being 100% perfect. It was only made so that we didn't end up like the island nation we were trying to be independent from, who was ruled by a king wearing a hat. Now, when it came to writing up the articles of the Constitution, the Founding Fathers had to decide how much power a central government would have compared to the powers of the people. Given that they didn't want a king, but they also didn't want to have a group of oligarchs running around, a new system needed to be developed. Now, that new system is where they developed the three branches of power in the United States. The legislative branch was surprisingly the one they feared the most due to the amount of shared power it contained. The executive branch had less power than Congress, as the president was supposed to act more like a face of the nation sort of fella, doing the paperwork and showing up to ceremonies, while the judiciary branch was feared the least, and the fathers had little belief in the courts that they would actually have that much of an impact on the country. But oh, how the times have changed. So what does it take to become president? Well, first you must qualify for three non-lenient rules in order to run. First, you must be over the age of 35. Next, you must have been a resident for at least 14 years, which is quite an odd number if I say so myself. And lastly, you need to have been a citizen of the country through birth or affiliation of your parents. And I know what you're thinking. That's great, I qualify since I'm probably listening to this presentation in the United States as a young adult. Now tell me, how the heck do I become president? Well, I'll tell you, my friend. First, we need to talk about how voting works in the country. Now, the basics are that through the Electoral College and on all the maps that you see on the news every 4th November through January of election years, you need 270 votes to win. Now, the total amount of electoral votes are 538, and simply winning through a majority is not enough to become president. Now, the numbers are calculated by looking at the 435 House seats, plus the 100 Senate seats, and the 3 DC lads who decide to join in as well. Now, I've given you all the numbers, but you probably still don't know what an elector actually is. Electors are trusted candidates who pledge to vote for their party's elect. For example, let's look at New Hampshire. Let's say that you voted for Biden in 2020. Through the popular vote, he gains enough counties to win all the electoral votes in the state. However, when you vote for Biden, you're actually voting for the 4 electors associated with him that are going to be voting for him once the state wins, and they do that through a pledging system. So if no one actually goes against their word and they do pledge to vote for the president that they're going to be voting for, that means that New Hampshire gains plus 4 Democratic electoral votes because Biden won all 4 electoral votes in the state. Now that continues on for every single state in the nation, except for a few exceptions depending on state laws. Some exceptions include Nebraska and Maine, where, for example, depending on their state laws, the electoral votes can be split into 2 groups. However, this is all state dependent, and if other states wanted to, they could follow suit just like this. This sort of thing isn't dictated by the Constitution, it's all dependent on state laws themselves. So now that we know how presidents are chosen, let's talk about what you can do to become a president yourself, besides playing golf all day or rapidly pressing the Coca-Cola button. Presidential powers follow as such. As president, you can veto any bills Congress may pass on to you, meaning that they get sent back to the House and Senate to be voted on, which has a very unlikely chance of being sent back to you at the end of the day. You're also the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces and the head of warfare. You may also grant pardons to whoever you wish, and most importantly, you're the face of the nation and the face of foreign affairs as well as trade. Now, it's that last one in particular that I really want to focus on, because when you think of the United States, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Of course, it's the president. Citizens of every country around the world probably know President Biden more than they do about the justices of the United States, or say the mayor of Kansas, among other things that are probably prominent in the United States. However, the president cannot force Congress to act on bills or speed up meetings that they may have. The president is also not above the law, and they cannot create laws by themselves or sign them without going through Congress first. The public opinion is also the worst enemy of the president, and they are reliant on them for re-election. They also can't just flip a switch and change things such as the economy or wars, and they must follow the articles and amendments of the Constitution, just like everyone else. Now let's look at an example of this play in history and how the president can make an impact on the direction that laws are going on in the country. For example, the war on drugs. It was one of the biggest movements during its time, and it was during a period where Presidents Nixon and Reagan could push for the motivations of their people to be in their favor. Reagan especially saw it as an opportunity to push for his image to be seen as one of the best presidents of all time, and he saw it necessary to take the war on drugs and go hard on it. He was going to hard ban drugs through himself and Congress passing a bunch of laws that no president had done before. But in order to get what he wanted, he needed to change the minds of both the American people as well as convincing Congress and passing a bill, which is the most important step in his plan. And one way he did this was through using rhetoric, speech, and psychological means of getting on America's good side so that Congress would make a bill for him to sign.
Good evening. Usually I talk with you from my office in the West Wing of the White House, but tonight there's something special to talk about, and I've asked someone very special to join me. Nancy and I are here in the West Hall of the White House, and around us are the rooms in which we live. It's the home you've provided for us, of which we merely have temporary custody. Nancy's joining me because the message this evening is not my message, but ours. And we speak to you not simply as fellow citizens, but as fellow parents and grandparents and as concerned neighbors. It's back to school time for America's children, and while drug and alcohol abuse cuts across all generations, it's especially damaging to the young people on whom our future depends. So tonight, from our family to yours, from our home to yours, thank you for joining us.
When the nation saw this, Congress took it as a sign that this was a step in the right direction, because this was the thing that the American people needed. It wasn't the riots on the streets that would occur after, so Congress, after that, all 97 seats of the Senate voted in favor of the bill, and it made its way to Reagan's desk for him to sign, smiling in front of an audience of American people. In this example, Reagan used his means as face of the nation to direct the opinions of the public towards his intention, signing the bill Congress handed to him and making the Anti-Drug Abuse Act a law, as well as, due to his party affiliation of being a Republican, allowing for his predecessor George H. Bush to take up the mantle of being president after his term ended. So now that we talked about all the powers a president has, let's see how it can be taken away through impeachment. Now, impeachment is a political, not criminal tool that's a step in the process for removing a president from office. The reasons for impeachment are not directly stated in the Constitution and are fairly lenient and open for loopholes. And for a president to be impeached, there needs to be a majority vote in the House and a 2/3 vote in the Senate for it to even be passable. Now, some presidents that have been impeached throughout history were Andrew Johnson, for example, in 1868, who was impeached for clashing with an anti-South Congress. He also violated the Tenure of Office Act, resulting in him in getting impeached but not removed from office. Next up, we have Richard Nixon in 1974, who nearly got impeached. However, he resigned before being impeached due to the Watergate break-in scandal being covered up due to his actions. We also have Bill Clinton in 1998, who was impeached for lying about an affair with intern Monica Lewinsky and obstructing justice. And finally, we have Donald Trump, who was impeached twice in 2019 and 2021. His first impeachment was for his abuse of power and Congress obstruction, and the second was for an insurrection that occurred during the White House. So congrats, you made it through my tutorial, and now you learned the basics of what it means to be a president of the United States. In this, we talked about how it started, how it got achieved, how it's empowered, and how it's regulated. So if you decide to run for president, you'll be able to not mimic the actions of Darth Sidious from Star Wars by becoming an emperor of the galaxy, but by abiding the laws of the country to keep it a nation of freedom and democracy, so you can hopefully be one of the best presidents of all time. I wish you luck with your future presidential runs, and hopefully you learned something valuable during this presentation.